So here we've got a toilet that doesn't flush. You can just keep cranking that handle, and the handle's round the wrong way at the moment. That's because I've actually disassembled it already, but it was facing that way, and you just keep flushing it and no water's coming through, and then occasionally it will flush. So I'll just take the lid off here. This is the siphon type, unlike the more modern flush valve type that has a central flush valve with a overflow built into it. This has a separate overflow here, and that pipe then just goes outside. I've disconnected it already. Just pull it out, pull the remainder of the overflow out. Of course, I've already, I should have said actually, I've already turned off the water down here, made sure that was shut off, and then I used a sponge to remove all of the, well, I flushed first. I did actually manage to get it to flush in the end, and removed all the water in there. Used a sponge to take that out. You should do that obviously before you're doing any of the other removal of items in here. So then you remove your overflow, or you don't have to do it in that particular order, but I've disconnected my mains in. You see there was that was connected to that, so that's connected to the ball float. And then you have this siphon left here, and this had a little screw. This has a little screw on it. So that just comes off of there. See, that was tightened on with that screw. Undo that, take that off. And you have this clip here and this siphon. But the only way to get this siphon out, some of the more modern ones have a peg or a screw here which lid off, and then you can access the parts inside. But in this case we don't have that. Probably a lot of the ones you won't. But this is actually fixed to this whole cistern, so you can't remove it without removing these two screws, which are still retaining this to the wall, and also the donut or the close coupler plate, which is held in by this bolt here and what was a bolt there. You'll see that in a minute when I pull it off. You very often find these are rusted, and I've actually just had to hacksaw through it back there, and so I'm not entirely sure. Probably have to re-drill some holes or something to refix it. It's going to be a bit of a pain, but that's what happens very often. So let me just pop this down for a second. So you have your close coupler washer. There's the remains of it there, so you can see it has already started to perish, and you see it's quite damaged there, so that's going to have to be replaced. So it's just falling apart as I pull it off. So I'm going to pull that off, take this off, remove the valve. So just unscrew that nut, take off the close coupler plate, or donut as some people call it, and then should just pop out the siphon. So there's a good chance, and I think, yeah, there, look, it's torn. This is actually, the only fault with this is well, probably the only fault with this is that that's torn. So you may have to replace seals. This is just generally old, so you can actually replace that by dismantling this unit. You make sure you take that pin out on the top there. Might be able to do it one-handed, but if you can take that out of there, that will drop through. So let's try that. So once I removed the hook, I was able to pull the pin out of that hole. Let's put this down there for a second. It was not easy doing this one-handed. I was able to pull that pin out of that hole because it was being held on with that hook, and then this dropped out, and this are holding this diaphragm on, which you can buy replacement. It's not identical in size, but you can just cut it to size. It's not a problem. Now, I could do that. I actually have a few options. I could do that. I could also do. Just went to the plumber store and bought several different options depending on what I was going to find. So this is a hole replacement unit, exactly the same system as this, but just brand new. And then of course you've got the filling valve as well, which lets the water in. And I was told by the client that that was not working either, so then alternatively you could replace the whole system for a more modern, you can see that, you've seen those styles before, in more modern, the dual push button systems. And there is a reason why I've not gone for this, even though I bought it, I just bought it as an option, is because number one, these systems have the overflow built into the flush valve, and because of that I now have a hole sitting through my wall which she doesn't have any replacement tiles for, and it would look a bit rubbish, to be honest, if I just sort of bodged that up. So the other reason is that there is, if you look on the, I'll just rearrange the system for a second. Yep, so you can see it's a very curved surface there, and I'm really not sure, and plus it's right on the edge, so this is just not going to sit there very nicely. I suppose I could carve a shape out of it, but already given that the overflow is going to have to be filled as well, I'm just going to not go with this option. So that's what I'm going to do next, replace the syphon and fill valve. To show you a comparison of the two, so obviously this is the old setup and this is the new one. So we're going to be placing the syphon inside the cistern, looking at the back of the cistern here in this orientation, and we've got to make sure that the rubber washer is on the inside of the cistern and then the nut goes on the outside. Okay, so what we've done next here is, well, that close couple, I've put the system back onto the toilet, just sat it on there. You can see the donut there. You've got the close coupler plate and the bolts on either side, and here I have a wing nut and washer. I'm going to put those on and tighten it down. So as I explained before, the bolts had rusted and I'm not going to bother to try and extract those. I had a quick look and it's just going to be more hassle than it's worth. Luckily, because the new donut is quite thick, this cistern sits slightly higher, plus it probably wasn't sat level as it could be. So now I've just piloted some new holes on both sides using a ceramic drill bit, which is one of these sort of arrow shaped drill bits. They're not very expensive. That's only okay for ceramic tiles. If these had been porcelain, then I would have had to go and bought a porcelain drill bit. So that's what I'm going to do next. But I'll have to probably take this off so that I can get my drill in there and then reassemble it all again.